Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for coming to the Mobility Working Group. Welcome. This is August 24th, 2023. My name is Councilmember Jose Rodriguez from the City of National City. I understand that there's a few new members. Would you like to quickly introduce yourselves?
Anybody? Chris?
Anybody new?
Good morning. I'm Christy Reeser. I'm the Deputy Director for the Mobility Division with the City of San Diego.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Ricardo Rodriguez with the Engineering Department at City National City. I'm currently covering for Luca Zapiello, who usually attends these meetings.
Welcome. Any other? We're good? All right. So before we begin, can we confirm with Tessa, please, to see if we have a quorum?
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum for this meeting.
Fantastic. Before we begin our agenda, I would like to review the meeting process. So both working group members and the public on how they wish to participate. Any working group members that want to speak, feel free to raise your hand. And members of the public already have the opportunity to either weigh in over Zoom or come in person. Before we continue, do we have any questions from any working group members? No? Okay, so moving on to item number 1. That is public comments. Tessa, do we have any public comments?
There are no public comments at this time.
Any comments from working group members before we start? All right, so moving on to item number 2. This is approval of the meeting minutes. I would like to entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 9th. I know it's been a minute since we've met.
And I would like to remind the voting members that you do not need to have been present at the meeting to vote on the minutes from that meeting.
Motion by Eric. Eric, what's your last name? I'm sorry.
Minichilli.
Minichilli.
Need a second?
Yes.
Okay, Joe Bright, Del Mar.
Thank you, Joe. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Fantastic. Moving on to the next item. Item number 3, Jennifer Williamson will introduce staff and provide updates on SANDAG's programs, projects, and initiatives.
I would like to note for the record that the motion on the minutes passed unanimously with those members present.
Thank you, Chair. So we have one staff member here to give us an update, and then you'll be hearing from me on a few items as well. So Cecily Taylor, who's our senior in charge of the Regional Plan Network, will give us an update on how that's going.
Yes, thank you. Thanks to everyone who joined our joint working group meeting last month. We also sent out a request after last month. This meeting was not able to be held last month, but we did send out a request for your help reviewing our model networks, the facilities that are in all of your jurisdictions. So if you have not gotten started on that, please take a look. We were asking for input by September 1st, if at all possible. I know that's coming up soon. There were some points of contact if you have questions, but you can also reach out to myself, Jennifer, Ashley, any of those of us that you frequently interact with. So thank you again, and looking forward to continuing to bring you updates.
Thank you, Cecily. So next up, I want to give you an update on our Transnet Ordinance Subcommittee meetings. Those have been happening over the last year or so. And at our next meeting, we're going to be bringing you an update on the bike ped accommodations. And I'm hopeful that we can get a really good group discussion because there are some significant changes proposed as part of that update. So a lot of work happening with that group. And then our December 7th, we're going to be having another joint working group meeting. So you guys will be able to weigh in on the regional plan. We'll be bringing you some discussion of our network development at that point. So look forward to that on December 7th. And then finally, I think maybe all of you or your primary members have received an email that we are updating our charter. And the purpose of this is to ensure that we can have additional alternatives at our meetings, so alternates, excuse me, and you can attend and support the meetings. Working group meetings have to be in person, and we know that it can be difficult for everybody to get here. And so having alternates allows us to have a greater pool of folks to be present at our meeting. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to the chair.
Thank you, Jennifer. Do we have any comments from the public on this item?
Thank you, Chair. We do not have public comments on 7, and I'd also like to note for the record, there were no public comments on the minutes.
Thank you. Any working group members with any questions or comments? Yep. Mr. May?
Yeah, good morning. Minji May with the City of Santee. I have just a question for SANDAG staff. I know a few years ago, SANDAG had hired a on-call consultant and also extended that service to local agency, I understand. Is that correct? Okay, who do I talk to get that kind of service?
You can talk to me.
Okay.
Well, after the meeting,
Thank you.
we'll get together and talk. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? This is only an informational item. I don't believe we need a vote on it. So we will be having a discussion on the next generation rapid conceptual planning update at a future meeting. So moving on to item number 6. We have a regional zero emissions vehicle presentation, which many of us have been looking forward
I
to.
think you skipped over 4.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. That's right. Sorry about that. Item number 4, we will be hearing from April de Jesus on the, flexible fleets?
Thank you, Chair. I thought I got a pass today.
Yeah, sorry about that. We literally discussed it 5 minutes ago. Sorry about, thank you.
Thank you. My name is April de Jesus. I'm a mobility planner here at SANDAG, and I'm here with Crystal Ayala from the City of San Diego, and we will be providing an update on our flexible fleets program. So for those of you who don't know, just a reminder, flexible fleets are part of our regional plan's 5 big moves, and they are mobility services that can be held through an app to provide point-to-point service. This includes microtransit, neighborhood electric vehicles, shared bikes, shared scooters, ride hailing, and car share. And historically, when we were looking at flexible fleets as it relates to microtransit, we had microtransit separate from Transit Leap. And as we're currently developing the regional plan, we're looking at maximizing the flexibility part of flexible fleet and integrating microtransit into our Transit Leap network. So when we do come back with the regional plan update, you're going to see some updates as it relates to flexible fleets as part of our regional implementation strategy. In December of last year, our team worked with the community-based organizations to finalize a flexible fleet strategic plan where we highlighted guidelines and best practices for implementing flexible fleets in our region. And we also identified some tier locations to look closely at implementation for some of these services. I'm happy to share that several of these top tier pilot area locations are either have already implemented some type of microtransit service or are in the process of receiving funding from Clean Mobility Options to plan for flexible fleet services. And we have more to come. So as part of a public agency, every time we contract with an operator, there's an extensive competitive process for contracting with those operators. And SANDAG had done a competitive procurement last year for several of these operators where local jurisdictions, universities, nonprofits, as well as SANDAG can use this competitive process to contract directly with the providers listed here for various flexible fleets categories. So micromobility is the shared bikes and scooters, and we are contracted with Lyft. Microtransit is a app-enabled service provided by a larger like van bus-like vehicle that's smaller than a bus, bigger than a van, about 16 to 18 passengers. And we are contracted with VIA. Neighborhood electric vehicles are similar to the Fred that you see downtown. We have several other pilots that I'll share later that we are implementing throughout the region. We are contracted with Circuit. We also have contracts with Ride Hail, Lyft for ride hail, and Get Around for car share. So we want to make flexible fleets very seamless for the customers throughout San Diego. So you don't have to download one app in City of San Diego and then get to the City of National City and have to download a different app. We're trying to have a unified, seamless customer experience. And we're also trying to save you time. So we already did the competitive process. We already did the negotiating for rates. We already negotiated for data. We want to make it easier for you to implement services if your local jurisdictions want to implement. So one of the reasons Crystal is here is to share more information about the partnerships that we have started. One of the partnerships is with the City of San Diego for the PB Nev Beach Bug, and it was a follow-up to the Mid-Coast plan, as we wanted to provide additional access options to our beach community. And this is a 2-year pilot project where we partner with the City of San Diego, and we're looking at various sustainable funding sources, including a parking district that was implemented to help support the operations of this service. And I'll pass it on to Crystal to provide more information on that.
Thank you, April. As April mentioned, we as a city were able to leverage that regional competitive process to enter into a cooperative agreement with Circuit for operations of these neighborhood electric vehicle services in Pacific Beach. Another really unique aspect of this pilot is the fact that we were able to establish a community parking district, which essentially created a sort of new model in which we could develop and operate and fund a service like this. So we're in the process of installing parking meters within the Pacific Beach community. That's going to provide an ongoing sustainable revenue source to be able to sustain the service. And it's something we're going to be monitoring as meter installations get underway later this summer. The intent of this 2-year pilot is to really kind of understand what the market is for services like these, how they can complement and expand regional transit services today, how we can help create those connections to and from the transit station, the Balboa Avenue transit station, to our coastal areas. And we really want to have an eye towards the finish line. We want to walk away from this pilot understanding what it takes to make these services really scale, really work, and how we can work to create sustainable, creative partnerships to operate these. We launched the service back in July. There was a lot of extensive community outreach that went into designing the service. The community helped us design that logo you see on the vehicles. They helped us name the beach bug. And we did a lot of surveying. We did an interactive mapping exercise to really understand where people wanted to go. And the reality was that they wanted to go everywhere. They wanted a lot of flexibility in where the shuttle can pick them up and drop them off. And so what you see here is a service area that is really comprehensive and reflective of the entire most of the community. And we initiated the initial service with really expansive hours, and that was to provide us with a lot of flexibility to really understand where the interest lies in using the service. Where is the market using the service? Where are they going? What kinds of trips are they using it for? And that's going to help us as we look to refine the service post-summer. So we're in the process now of evaluating the first months of data to develop a refined operating plan October 1st. At that time, we'll also be introducing a really low fare, $250 per person per day. And that'll help, again, to create another revenue stream to be able to sustain the service well after the 2-year pilot. I'll hand it back to April to talk about some of the other pilots, and here available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Crystal. So one of the higher priorities when we develop these neighborhood electric vehicle operation services is to find sustainable funding sources. So developing a parking district has helped benefit the Pacific Beach neighborhood electric vehicle implementation. We're also looking at funding source through implementing the fare, which we will be deploying later this fall, and we're looking at advertising revenue. So part of the relationship with parking is looking at with this parking district, we're looking at turnover. We're looking at how the businesses react because we want not only to provide people with opportunity to leave their cars and not park their cars in the region, but also help the businesses and provide economic support through the neighborhood electric vehicle services. So one of the pilots that we have underway is the PBNev Beach Bug. The other we have is the Oceanside Neighborhood Electric Vehicle, also known as GoSide. This is a continuation of service that was implemented last summer, where they received COVID funds to start a neighborhood electric vehicle around Oceanside. And we partnered with Oceanside to continue the service, to continue to evaluate how we can deploy some of these neighborhood electric vehicles in our region. We had an extensive social equity analysis and also extended some of we extended the project area from the original location so we could serve some senior populations in Oceanside and also other areas from the region. This is a partnership with the City of Oceanside as well as Visit Oceanside. The launch last summer was so successful that there was a lot of interest in extending the service, and we're really excited to hear that there are more partnerships and more ways that we can fund these types of services. This second launch of service started with a fare, and it's interesting to note that there's still a lot of interest in the service operations. We're averaging about 2 to 3 passengers per vehicle, and each vehicle fits 5 passengers. So that's a really high rate of ridership that we're seeing, especially with the fare already in service. We're getting a lot of feedback from the drivers that people are still very excited about GoSide and they want to see more of it. So when we did the implementation in June for this service, we knew that the summer demand would be a lot higher than the fall winter demand. So we are also looking at changing the service when the peak goes down after the summer tourism ends. And then another pilot project that we are anticipating funding for is we just submitted a phase 2 application for a Clean Mobility Options grant. And we anticipate getting funding for operations in Southeast San Diego. This is another partnership with the City of San Diego and the Urban Collaborative Project, which is the CBO in this neighborhood. The Urban Collaborative Project took initiative and did a community needs assessment through the Clean Mobility Options Grant Program, which allowed us to compete for the set-aside funding for microtransit operations. So different from the neighborhood electric vehicles from the first 2 pilots, this is microtransit with VIA, and we will be launching the service probably a year from when we receive the funding. We'll be spending this next year trying to work with the community to identify the operating plan for the service, and we should be coming back with updates. We're hoping to hear back from this program in the next month or so. So another update I wanted to provide is a request for innovative concepts with BEEP and with a BEEP program. This is a funding mechanism to identify ways for our local jurisdictions, employment centers, schools, universities to implement some of these mobility hubs amenities in their communities. The consortia that proposed to SANDAG has provided a funding opportunity where they will provide all of the funding costs to implement these neighborhood vehicles along with electric vehicle charging. And the concept is to look at some of the features in our mobility hubs and identify smaller nodes within your community to connect and provide charging, to provide shared scooters, shared bikes, and connections to our regional transportation network. And that way, in order for the community to access the larger transportation network, they can ride these autonomous vehicles to connect to each of these nodes. They can take a scooter, they can take a bike, and create these areas where the community can come together and either transfer onto these mobility services or also provide retail space for these, just to bring these connections through each community. This is a concept where they are providing funding to jumpstart all the capital programming, where you don't really need to look for capital programs through FTA or FHWA. They will fund everything upfront in exchange for a long-term contract with your jurisdiction. They've been meeting with several of our local jurisdictions so far. And if you would like to have more information on this, Danielle is here to answer any questions about this request for innovative concepts. It's new to us. But it's also very exciting because it provides an opportunity for us to really invest in our mobility services upfront without having to wait for funding. So if anyone is interested in hearing more about our Flexible Fleets program or has any questions or would like to meet individually on any of these updates, please email us at flexiblefleets@sandag.org, or you can continue checking in on the SANDAG website for updates.
April, can you just take a moment to talk a little bit about the technical expertise that SANDAG will give to the communities and the jurisdictions to support if you guys want to implement a flexible fleet? April and her group is a resource for you to reach out and talk to. So can you address that just a little bit?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that reminder. So we at SANDAG have done a lot of research on best practices for implementing all of these flexible fleet services and operations. We've been working closely with several local jurisdictions through the Flexible Fleets Task Force that meets about quarterly, which is a subset of the Mobility Working Group, where we all share what we're learning, what some of the challenges are, what are some things that we need to put in place in anticipation of starting service or changing service operations or preparing for longer term service planning. Also, we have the contracts in place that we can support as well. If any of your local jurisdictions or if any of you would like to implement flexible fleets or have any questions on implementing, you can email us about participating in our task force, or we can even set up one-on-one meetings just to give you a little bit more background on some of the best practices for implementation. So there are several ways that we want to work with our region to make sure that if you are developing one of these services in your local jurisdictions, that we're doing it in a unified way where we're all sharing data, we're all sharing best practices, and we're all able to identify contracts that support what's best for our region. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, April. Really appreciate it. Do we have any comments from the public?
There are no public comments on this item.
Any comments from working group members? Questions? Yes.
Sam Hassan in the City of Vista. Just can you expand on the contract that SANDAG entered with the service providers? It sounds like it allows local agencies to piggyback, but then we need to provide our own funding.
Yes. So we have basically a bench or an on-call for the providers listed here, where we competed early on in the request for proposals. We assumed that several of our local jurisdictions would want to use this contract and use some of the terms and the hours that we negotiated. So we have up to $25 million that we can allocate under this contract for these services with these providers. And if you are interested in using our flexible fleets on call, you can email me and I can just confirm that there still is capacity to allocate to your local jurisdiction. I'll send you a letter and then give you the contact information to start negotiating the operations with the service provider.
Sorry, one more question back to the B program. I missed a part of that. Is that a private program or a public program? I think you had a slide on a program called B.
Yeah, it's a funding mechanism for investment in your local jurisdiction. So there's not really a dollar value attached to it through SANDAG. We're just kind of providing that relationship to the consortia. And Danielle, you can speak to a little bit more to it. She's the project manager for this program.
Thank you.
Sure. So this proposal looks at bringing private equity to be able to fund some of the infrastructure improvements and services that would be available. It's really kind of a comprehensive approach to creating mobility nodes, providing a shuttle service, providing the electric vehicle charging infrastructure, both for the vehicles and the devices that people might be using, personally owned and shared. And then like a placemaking component as well. And so it brings private equity towards that and looking at kind of building coalitions among multiple stakeholders that might be interested in participating, including employers, developers, cities. So it's not really a contract per se, but it's a delivery concept.
Thank you.
Has there been any collaboration or discussion with school districts about how these programs could maybe help address some of the e-bike concerns that we've seen in several of the cities?
So I think that so far we're just sort of contracting and launching the service, and we're going to continue working with our universities and school systems on like sharing some of that information. I don't have a specific working group now, or I haven't been meeting with them regularly, but that is part of our initiative of developing these programs. And Crystal, I think that you guys have started with San Diego Unified too.
As part of launching the Beach Bug, it's been a good opportunity to have some of these conversations around, we're introducing new services to the community, but we also have a lot of existing modes that we want to make sure we're addressing and comprehensively providing the infrastructure and education around those services. We're starting with Pacific Beach as part of the Beach Bug and developing sort of like a safe routes to school education component, and hope to scale that out to other parts of the community as well.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Tom Frank. I'm with City of Carlsbad Transportation Director and City Engineer. And we've been having a lot of conversations on this subject. First of all, flexible fleets, very big supporter. This is very great program that you've launched and very supportive of it. And we comment on it in every opportunity we get for the regional plan updates, both the current one that's under revision and the 2025. And we also have the Transnet subcommittee group, which we're talking about, and that's in regards to the current pool of funds for the remaining little Transnet dollars, which we have. So I commented and actually provided a presentation at the last meeting, which we didn't have a quorum on, and it was in regards to the state of the commute. And so as we know, and at least in North County, and I think throughout the county, we've seen a tremendous increase in bike ridership, which is excellent. We've also seen our TDM really perform, and the biggest contributor of that is actually flexible commuter schedules or work from home. So that's by far the largest contributor to improve transportation demand management. And so where we said we have to be here in person, you get that collaboration benefit. A lot of us are doing telecommuting. So I was on an interview just right before this. I apologize for being late. So there's that benefit. So unfortunately, what we're seeing just regionally, and it's not just regionally, it's statewide. There's an article that BART up in the Bay Area is at 39% of where it was pre-COVID. What we've been seeing regionally and statewide is fixed route transit's been going down for 10 years. That's with the exception of the pandemic. So there's a lot of opportunity here with flexible fleets, and I think we really need to focus on that. And I can't emphasize it really enough. So we would love to talk about what opportunities exist for flexible fleets. I've actually presented many times to iTalk and others about what we could do to make positive improvements to our regional plan, which actually highlight the flexible fleet opportunities with our existing infrastructure. Flexible fleet's proven, it's very proven performance. City of San Clemente has had it in play for 2017. Doubled the ride share. They actually had to raise the prices because it was so successful. So it's proven performance, and I can't, again, emphasize enough. So a couple of direct questions is, one, I hear there's $25 million available or budgeted for the program.
Just to clarify, the $25 million is not a budget availability, it's a capacity allocation for the contract. So it just allows us to award that amount.
Thank you. And so what is actually budgeted for in the SANDAG Transnet budget or in the SANDAG budget? And then how much is already appropriated for the existing pilot programs?
So currently, there are no Transnet dollars allocated for the Flexible Fleets program. We have funded the 3 pilot projects that I identified here for microtransit, which would be the PBNev Beach Bug, the Oceanside Go Side, and the upcoming Southeast San Diego microtransit that we anticipate receiving funding through CMO in the upcoming months.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So as we know, SANDAG and our transit authorities receive the funding, the revenue for local regional transit operations. And in our subcommittee meetings, we're talking about if there's going to be revisions to our funding programs and our allocations. And that's where I think we definitely don't want to limit what our new programs are. There was some discussion about that our transit operation allocations are not for discussion in that subcommittee, and that's already been decided through a memorandum that was issued. And I think that is something we should definitely be looking at. And we don't want to, I don't think I would caution about restricting our opportunities to use our transit funding for new programs, proven programs such as what you presented. So I would again encourage us to remain open and flexible to using all of our funding in the most appropriate manner possible. I think there's, again, tremendous opportunity to provide equitable, sustainable, clean, efficient, safe public transit options with flexible fleets. And yeah, anything that we can do to incorporate our agency comments into the future revisions of the regional plan, we greatly appreciate. And I will specifically reach out to you with our NCTD partners and see how we can kickstart some programs, because we would be very interested in several of these components. One being the similar program to what Oceanside has started. A lot of promise, I think, with that in our village area and our coastal area. And then again, the program I mentioned, more or less the ride hailing program, very successful in the city of San Clemente. It addresses the transit deserts that many agencies experience. And it's just very popular and a very equitable, cost-effective manner to provide public transit. So those are my initial comments. And I know there's a lot there, but look forward to further discussions about how we can actually fund this tremendous program. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Frank. Any other comments, questions? I do have a couple. So where do the Beach Bug and the Go Site charge?
So
do they have a specific charging station, or do they charge elsewhere?
We're currently contracted with Circuit as a turnkey service, where Circuit identifies locations for electric vehicle charging if possible. And for Oceanside specifically, the city of Oceanside allocates a storage and charging space for our vehicles. So we're able to get that subsidy back into operations for charging. And then for the PBNev, go ahead.
The city's in the process of doing an RFP to outfit all of the public lots in the city with electric vehicle charging infrastructure. While that happens, though, we were able to establish a unique partnership with one of the local businesses in Pacific Beach, a hotel, who was interested in hosting the Beach Bug, home of the Beach Bug, and Circuit installed charging infrastructure. So they upgraded their facilities to be able to charge the vehicles there overnight. And then those vehicles were chargers were not in use by Circuit, are available for the hotel.
That's great. Thank you. That's very creative, and working with private partners to make sure that, this program is successful, and probably a very smart decision by the hotel itself, right? To offer the service for their customers. I actually agree with Mr. Frank, and I do believe this program is fantastic, and we need to make sure that we support it in other jurisdictions. I'm glad to see that it's happening in El Cajon, Imperial Beach, San Marcos, in our very own national city. And although in National City, we'll be opening our own up in the next month and a half to 2 months. It'll be called a free ride around National City. And so we're looking for long-term sustainable funding. So we really look forward to working with you all to assure that happens in a creative manner, whether it's having a slight fee or having specific parking districts or whatever mechanism we use, but we want to make sure that this program continues for a very long time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other additional questions or comments?
Hi, I'm Tila with the City of Oceanside. I just want to make a comment that when we're all talking about this, I don't hear any mention of the public transportation already existing like MTS or NCTD. And I just want to make sure that they also are involved in all the conversations and that there's some form of coordination, you know, with those other entities as well, because I want to maximize what we have in terms of where these, you know, like Go Side and Oceanside goes and all that stuff. And we're not overlapping so that we can maximize, because I know NCTD is working on a micro transit project right now. And, you know, I just want to make sure that there's collaboration between those two. So just want to make that comment.
As April mentioned earlier, we have a flexible fleet task force, and on that task force, the transit operators are also on there. So there is a level of collaboration. And, you know, one of the great things about the task force is, as April said, it's a place where the jurisdictions come together and we share a lot of information about these different systems because as you've heard here, there's a lot of interest. And at the board level, there's a lot of interest in our flexible fleet services. So we want to make sure that we're maximizing funding, but that collaboration, it's not only about, you know, serving areas that aren't served by NCTD or MTS today, it's also an arena to get folks that can't access transit well to transit on the flexible fleet services, because, you know, that can be an impediment. And we're learning from PB is that a lot of folks are in fact doing that. They're using the transit, the flexible fleet service to access the regional transit to get to their jobs. So where they might not been able to use it before, they're now able to use the regional system. Lots of wins here with this service.
Yes, Mr. Frank.
Yeah, one more question. And I'm glad to hear about your program starting up in the community, and I'm sure it's going to be really successful. Love the name. Great name. So great to hear about these options and you know what you're offering as SANDAG. I wondered for the ride hailing with Lyft, and like I said, I've actually worked with an agency that had a real successful program. How are you handling the paratransit issue? Do they have another provider, or how are you addressing that?
So paratransit will still be operated under our NCT and MTS programs, but as we are launching these pilots, all of our vehicles are ADA accessible for microtransit and neighborhood electric vehicles. We're looking at options for supporting the paratransit operations with these services in the future. So a lot of these pilots are really to help us inform, like, what can we do next to better plan with NCTD and MTS as it relates to paratransit. And we're closely collaborating with them through our task force to provide updates, and hopefully we can have more intense partnerships as it relates to the paratransit services that exist today.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Other thoughts, comments? No, thank you so much for the presentation. Very much appreciated. This is an informational item only. So thank you so much. Moving on to item number 5, which we will be moving on to a future agenda item. Item number 6, that is the Regional Zero Emission Vehicle. We have a presentation from Susan Friedman.
Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here today and just getting to, there we go, clicker. My name is Susan Friedman, and I manage our climate planning program in the planning department. And one of the areas we focus on is planning for that transition to zero emission vehicles and infrastructure. So I'm here today to talk about the development of a regional ZEV or zero emission vehicle strategy that SANDAG's done as part of a collaboration with several others called Accelerate to Zero Emissions Collaboration. And this effort was part of the 2021 regional plan as our near-term implementation actions. let's see. So I'll give you a little bit of background about the collaboration and some of the things we're working on, and then really focus on what the strategies are, and would really love to hear any feedback you might have on those and what you'd like to focus in. So in terms of A to Z, the mission of the group is really to curb air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions through transportation electrification. And the idea came about in 2020. It was in a meeting with SANDAG and San Diego Gas and Electric, the County of San Diego, the City of San Diego, and the Air District. We decided, in addition to all the programs we were working on or planning individually, it made sense to come together and see what we could also do collaboratively to move the dial on zero emission transportation. After the core team came together, we also founded a steering committee, which has sub-regional representation from the local governments, as well as business association, 2 equity focus groups, and academia. And I'll add, we also have an advisory group that we were trying to meet a few times a year, and that includes a lot of participation from many local governments, as well as universities, labor, and industry. So the 4 main objectives of A to Z were to develop a regional gap analysis, and we did that in 2021 and really looked at where we were in 2020, where we needed to be in 2030, and what are the gaps in vehicles and infrastructure needs. And then number 2 is what we're on right now, developing a regional strategy to come up with how do we fill those gaps. The third one is to increase resources coming into the region. We've worked together to provide comments on national and state funding opportunities, as well as planning out ways that we in the region can bring more funding here. And then lastly, once the strategy is done, we'd like to serve as a forum to inform regional ZEV efforts. So where local governments and other agencies can have some conversations with industry representatives and such to see what are some innovative things we can do and what are our needs and how they can be addressed. So this was the gap analysis that I mentioned. And really it looked at, with 2020, we had about almost 70,000 zero emission vehicles in the region. We expect through market forces as well as policy adoption that there'll be about 770 vehicles in San Diego in 2030. I'll say today we have about 95,000 vehicles are registered in San Diego County that are zero emission. And what the gap analysis really showed was it looked like we were going to meet these targets in terms of the vehicles, but we are lagging behind in terms of infrastructure. So unlike vehicles which have a lot of state mandates around them and targets, that does not exist for the infrastructure side of it. So there's a lot more effort that's got to be done in terms of both types of EV charging as well as hydrogen fueling stations, which will really be a big help when we're looking at trucking and long distance trucking and buses. So this, for the strategy here, we hired a consultant, and this was funded through SDG&E. All the public agencies that were involved created the scope of work. SDG&E funded the consultant to perform the scope of work. And it's been going on for about a year and a half. And we really started out with doing a lot of engagement at community events through the core team and the other steering committee members to get a feel for what do people think about EVs, what are challenges around it, what are opportunities they're thinking about, and then where should we be focusing efforts. So with the support, we are working through now we developed core principles that I'll get to in a second, but the strategy is nearly completed, a report document that we expect to be done next month and to be debuted at the San Diego Region's National EV Day, which will be in the middle of October. And in a future meeting, I'll share information about that as we get it. So before digging into 10 strategies that we came up with, we decided we needed to have some principles around our decision-making and planning. And this follows very well in line with what the state's already been doing through their California ZEV market development strategy. And these 5 principles that we went out into the communities about and got a lot of positive feedback on our equity in every decision, embracing all zero emission vehicle pathways, collective problem solving, solving, public complementing private actions, and designing for resilience and adaptation. So just hitting on a couple of those with the Embracing All ZEV pathways, that means both battery electric vehicles and hydrogen-powered fuel cell electric vehicles. It means the neighborhood electric vehicles that we heard from April in the last item on, through passenger vehicles, cars, trucks, and buses. In terms of public complementing private, public agencies and the state do a lot of policy making and regulations that can spur on the market innovates, and then that feeds back into even more aggressive goals at the state as well as locally. So these are our strategies that we came up with. And let me see right here. The way we went through this was really taking a look at best practices that were happening in other regions and other states, assessing the regulatory conditions in the state. And then we had the consultant perform some data modeling to come up with what could be the most impactful strategies. And with these, there are several tactics under each. So just looking at a few, these will be broken down in the next few slides. But increasing the amount of zero emission VMT out of the total amount of vehicle miles traveled, having accessible infrastructure across the region, increasing awareness about these types of vehicles and the infrastructure, being innovative, having innovative pilots, and supporting fleet transitions are some of the highlights. So on this slide and the next couple, what I've done is I've got each strategy, a shortened version of it listed in the top half, and in the bottom half are some of the tactics to implement those strategies. I like to say a lot of the tactics, they're complementary across strategies. So you can see that some that increase, say the emission, increase the amount of EVMT would be like providing rebate programs for vehicles. And then if we are focusing incentives, having higher incentives for low income and disadvantaged communities, that also meets with helping out in the equitable siting of infrastructure and improving access to vehicles. So again, a lot of complementary efforts on here. In the report itself, what we'll have are tactics that can be implemented by regional agencies, local governments, communities, as well as industry. And so it'll divide it out that way. So talking about a couple here, as I mentioned with the first one with increasing EVMT, we're doing that right now with supporting some rebates that the state is offering and getting education out about that. In SANDAG itself, we are designing a rebate program for zero emission vehicles that we plan to have open in 2025. Also, the Air District has just launched a program, Clean Cars for All, which is retiring older, more polluting vehicles and providing incentives either for a new electric vehicle, a used electric vehicle, or even an e-bike and other options. In terms of increasing awareness, we've heard from community members, you know, if you get a ride and drive out there and people get a chance to see vehicles and work them, it really makes a huge difference in folks wanting to try and maybe consider purchasing a new or used vehicle next that are EV. For a couple more of these, we have strategy number 4. It's actually, we've updated this based on some feedback we've gotten from doing these presentations. It was called Supporting Regional Economic Growth. Nobody knew what that meant, but the actual tactics in that are supporting workforce development and training, and we're just going to be a lot clearer about that now. So the report's going to have a supporting workforce development strategy, and by that is collaborating with our local community colleges, as well as high schools, identifying workforce training needs, programs that could be funded by the state or the feds and brought into the region, and really keeping that discussion going with both students as well as institutions. In terms of strategy 5, this is something we've been working on already since 2020, where we launched a EV charger rebate program for public infrastructure and workplaces. There's a need where there's a lot of folks in the region that maybe rent their homes or live in multifamily dwellings, and it's very difficult to get chargers sited there and installed there in a timely manner. And that's where having publicly accessible chargers and workplace chargers really helps out. And so this goal is really on that and really expanding the work that's already being done here. In terms of a couple on this slide, well, the lowering the policy and financial barriers would be really even restructuring the way some rebate programs are. And we've heard this in our social equity working group about current car rebates are you buy the car first and then maybe 3 months or up to 8 months later, you get the rebate. And that really doesn't help someone who might be struggling for that car purchase. So we're looking to design a program that addresses this at the point of sale. And that might be by working with dealerships or other mechanisms so that there is a reduction in that upfront cost of a new or a used zero emission vehicle. Similarly, there's also work that's being done that focuses on some things with SDG&E as well as the local community choice aggregators, which is addressing local grid capacity for zero emission vehicle demand. If everybody's starting to plug these in, we really want to educate folks and offer reductions in costs for, charging a vehicle at a workplace or at home during the middle of the day when there's a lot of solar and renewable energy on the grid. And then disincentivizing the spot where it's most expensive and the grid's most constrained between about 4 and 9 p.m. at night. And we see areas of the country where there aren't these time of use kind of programs or load managing kind of programs. You see people charging at basically the worst times of day to support everybody's use of the electrical grid. And in California, you're seeing a lot of behavior change to go into where it's cheaper or renewables are more abundant. And then this is the last slide of strategies, I promise. But a couple of these really resonated when we talked to some of the Public Works Department members in terms of number 9 with encouraging fleet transitions. Some were already working on developing fleet transition plans with, you can't just go out and buy a new EV just because, any new purchase, you really want to look at what is your vehicle replacement schedule, what are the available incentives out there, and when will you have the infrastructure to power those vehicles. And so there's a little bit more than what used to be the case for fleet transition plans. And so this is a really great first step that both companies as well as local governments are doing. In terms of innovative pilots with zero emissions, I'd say right now, SANDAG, we have a grant proposal, a concept up at the California Energy Commission to pilot a wireless in-road charging concept, really demonstrated on a handful of miles of road, working with the transit operator to see about if we can charge while you're driving with a special case. That could be a way in the future if all cars and buses and trucks are electric in 20 or 30 years. That could be a great way to be able to power these vehicles in addition to some home charging, as well as to have smaller batteries in the vehicles, which works out well for especially trucks, because if you take away the weight of the batteries, you have more room for the goods in the vehicle. And then another piece of that is really getting more hydrogen fueling stations in production down here, because that really does look like the method that's going to work best for our interregional trucking needs. So from there, that was a snapshot of a much longer document that we're expecting to see in a couple more weeks. But we want to continue to hear feedback on the strategy, really the tactics, anything that resonates with people. We'll have the final report expected in mid-September. And then we're going to have outreach continuing, especially with the October EV Day later this fall, and really on some meetings about, how can public agencies and local governments use the strategy and how can that help them in ways to fund the measures. So with that, that's the end of my little talk on this, and happy to answer any questions, take comments.
Thank you, Ms. Friedman. Do we have any comments from the members of the public?
There are no public comments on this item.
Any comments or questions from working group members? Yep.
First off, another great program and strategies that you've listed and we've participated. So I'm really excited about this. It's like, this is the best agenda ever. So I just love both agenda items.
You were really bummed out about us postponing the last one, I know.
Yeah, I was. I was so excited, but I was so happy to see this agenda. Again, in regards to SANDAG's efforts, there's a lot of opportunity to, I guess, support this endeavor. And as probably a lot of us have seen, that the electric vehicle sales is just going through the roof. Like I saw a report in May where the new car sales were something like 6 times the combined non-EV sales. So they're like just, I mean, speaks for itself, 6 times what the non-EV car sales are. So what I would focus on is having this program work on the demand side, like how can we support the public desire for this clean mobility. And so one thing that I've presented again during our regional plan discussions is a great pilot project for SANDAG to consider. And this would be to support this zero electric vehicle or bless you effort. And so the pilot project would be on I-5 as a part of the NCC program, already adopted by the EIR that was approved for that program. It actually allows for an additional managed lane. And so if we had in the regional plan funding and included as a project, we could fund and construct that additional managed lane and dedicate it to just electric vehicles, period. And it would support both EV busing vehicles, it would support EV pooled vehicles, and it would be demand driven. I think it would be very, very popular. As we see, there's a big percentage of electric vehicles on the road today. And then with our forthcoming flexible fleets and our ride hailing efforts, those could be basically constrained to, you can't use that managed lane unless if you have a pooled ride of either 2 or 3 or greater. So it would be demand driven. You'd see tremendous success and it'd be very cost effective. So other than that, and that specific project would support your strategies 1 and 2. And other than that, the excellent program, and thank you for the update.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Yep.
I know for small cities especially, it's helpful when there's cooperative purchasing agreements that already have kind of EVs ready to go and selected and prices negotiated. I'm not sure that exists yet, but I'm sure, especially for trucks, would be nice to have that kind of thing in the future.
Any other questions, comments? I do have a question. Have we, thank you so much for the presentation and the work on this item. Can we, or have we had the conversation around including EV charging stations, or at least the infrastructure in new developments in our cities? Because I don't believe that the housing conversation is taking place at the same time as the electric vehicle conversation.
Yeah, the state's doing a lot of work on that effort for us because the new California building codes and CalGreen do require, at least in multifamily dwellings and commercial developments, there's a requirement to have those EV ready for chargers. And I believe City of San Diego, I can get back on that, but I thought they also were requiring a certain amount to have EV stations in them, but I'll follow up on that. But there is, yeah, a certain percentage of parking stalls that do have to be equipped with EV chargers or have the conduit already run so that future EV chargers can go in. And then to support that further, SANDAG's been doing a couple things. Through our charger rebate program, some of our technical assistance has been for local governments in order to conduct permit streamlining. The state came up with a checklist and a draft ordinance that expedites the inspection and installation of EV chargers at commercial places and residential places and in the public. And it takes a while for everybody to come up to speed on that. This was the same with solar and installing that. But so we just had a webinar a couple months ago for local governments on that with the state. And that's another effort combined with the code, then having it be easy for businesses and contractors to come in and actually install the equipment. And it kind of all works together, but we'll continue to work on outreach in that area because it is tough.
Thank you. And thinking, because we keep approving projects in National City that don't have them, and I know it's going to take a little while for us to adjust, but what can us as municipalities do to move in this new direction? Because those apartments will be there for 40, 50 years, right? So we want to make sure that they're built for the future.
Yeah, if you have your staff reach out to me, or you or your staff reach out to myself or Jeff that are on this, Jeff Oyos, who are on this sheet here, we can check in and do a little quick investigation of where your city stands in terms of adhering to the permit streamlining. There are actually laws that have been in place for a few years now, but there's a lot of tools to make it a very simple process for a city to come up to speed and make it easier for your permit and plan check people to move through the process. So I'd say more than half of our local cities are streamlined, but then there's another quarter that are on their way to being streamlined and some that haven't started yet. But we could help with that. And that also helps your contractors, your local businesses do business in your city a lot simpler on this, in this.
Thank you so much. And also attached to the parking, in very dense communities, there's a lot of state bills pushing for denser development, especially around transit lines, which we want smart growth, but we have very limited parking spots, if at all. So we are considering projects right now without any parking availability on site. So again, working with SANDAG staff and assuring that we try to make sure that the public infrastructure is there in order to accommodate for EVs that are going to be the wave of the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say this also gets to another part of this is that buildings are becoming more electrified. So as whether it's existing buildings or new construction, it's really a new twofold area we're seeing with having more electric appliances instead of natural gas, but you also want to hit the parking areas to make sure that you have enough adequate electrical supply for EV charging stations. But it's all really new for about everybody. So we're looking at different resources we can start bringing, and through another subject that you'll get a 3-minute update at your next meeting on, there's an EPA grant, a program for us to do a regional climate action plan, but that is a prerequisite for almost $5 billion worth nationwide of competitive grant funding that the EPA will have that can go toward these efforts on electric vehicles, can go toward building efforts, and it can go toward even transit efforts. So it's going to be very far reaching. That's just a little sneak peek to come back to your next meeting about.
Thank you so much, Ms. Friedman. Very much appreciated. Any other comments, questions? All right, I believe this was an informational item only. So that would finalize our agenda items. Our next mobility working group meeting is on Thursday, September 14th, 2023 at 9 a.m. Thank you all so much.